Welcome back to Breakneck. We are chatting about AI today. Again, the topic from the perspective of two people building companies. Ian is a well-respected, at least is the highest in my esteem product leader and serial entrepreneur. I'm building a company as well, and just from this standpoint of someone selling, someone building, there's obviously a lot of hype around AI, and it is a topic for investors, for customers, for entrepreneurs. Can you break down, maybe addressing someone who would be a skeptic, where are we in hype versus reality along the dimensions that you think are important for someone making decisions about product or investment?
Yeah, I've had the privilege, I suppose, of living through multiple hype cycles. Probably the one that resonates with me most at the moment is drones. There was a period in time where everything was going to be drones, right? It was gonna radically change the world. It didn't deliver on that. Ultimately, they were sensors in the sky, and they are quite a useful thing. But in my mind, I'm comparing and contrasting, and this is an order of magnitude bigger in terms of the potential, maybe two orders of magnitude. And so my hot take on it is hype versus reality is pretty damn close. Um, Give you a couple of examples. Your product actually is a really powerful example of a vertical solution for me that is really delivering on the hype. I won't go into the nuts and bolts. I'll leave that to you to kind of describe that. But it's in the project management space. And first time I saw it, I was like, oh my God, I'd never thought we'd be able to do something like that. And
I'm surprised. I'm a convert. I thought it was
yeah,
hype, and now I'm like, that used to be very difficult, and now that's measurably easier, like 100x.
yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and just for people who don't know me, I've spent my whole life in product, hardware, software, service, the whole gamut. I don't know how many products I've seen or been involved in, but I was remarking to one of my folks in the last week. We've done some demos of some new stuff. We did 4 demos in a week, and in every single demo, a customer uttered the word "wow" to me. That as a product person is like manna, right? You never hear that. And so there's something unique about what's going on here. Now, I still think the kind of hype cycle makes sense. I think we're at kind of the peak. We haven't hit the trough of disillusionment, but what's that going to look like? I think what's in front of us is consumers have been educated, let's say, by the media as to what this thing is capable of. I think they're expecting a lot more than it can a bit more than it can deliver. So we've got to align really those expectations around reality. But I would say, depending on the use case, we're 20-25% off. We are not an order of magnitude off in terms of the expectations of what customers are actually seeing. So I think it's one of these rare cases that hype and reality are pretty dang close. In the next 24 versus 48 months, what's going to happen? The next 24, people are going to get a lot more exposure and experience to it, so that the gap between reality and hype will diminish. The other thing that's happening here is the rate of advancement is so quick that I think we've got 12 months where agents are the thing, and that's the hype cycle. I think we don't have language around it yet, but I think orchestration of agents is the next 12 months after that. So I think we're going to enter another cycle of hype cycle after that, if you like. But right now in the space of agents, we're going to deliver damn close to what people are expecting.
Yeah, it's funny that you contextualize it in drones. I think there's a few kind of major technology breakthroughs that looked like they were going to change everything, and they've had an impact, and they're certainly still major sources of investment, but they just never really made the impact. With drones was one, additive manufacturing or 3D printing is one where
Yeah.
it just took so much longer to become important. But I think a good one that I compare when looking at selling into enterprise, for instance, which is where I go, is cloud.
Mm-hmm.
it was clear cloud was going to be a thing in 2008, 2009. Certainly by 2012, you were like, okay, cloud's the next big thing. Still, we're adopting cloud 15 years later. And I think that's going to be an issue for AI as well. It's going to take a lot longer to adopt, maybe much faster than cloud, but it's going to take a lot longer for people to get the benefit in their company than they think is reasonable. And so when you're selling, being someone who's, yeah, like you said, they already have the expectation and you're that ambassador who is going to help them transform their company, I think is that was a mode that was always useful when cloud, hey, we're going to just, it's useful. We're going to help you work for your company. And you get a lot of people who are, when you talk about AI, oh, we're pretty old school, or we're not innovative. And so if you have that consultative feel, like, no, this is all real. You're right to want it. You're not abnormal for not having it yet. And let's work together to deliver it.
Yeah, I think, in product land, we talk about user models. Like, what is the model that you refer to when you look at something new? And we have this model because essentially we're mimicking human behavior. So that's one thing that helps here. And then the other thing is, I spent another hype cycle I've been in is autonomous driving. And it's coming, but it's slow. And it's super exciting, and it's got all these I think wonderful benefits. But accessibility to the technology, it has been a challenge for that industry. It's not very accessible. But agentic AI is absolutely accessible to so many people in terms of building products around this. So again, another factor I think that's driving the rapid advancement and this small discrepancy between hype and reality.
Yeah, we're having a discussion this weekend. My wife had who you know well, had a conversation with a real skeptic. Like, oh, it's LLMs are going to come and then they're going to just be a flash in the pan and not leave anything behind. But just looking at my own, I was a data scientist 10, 12 years ago, and the type of things that we had to build ourselves that you can get out of the box now, especially around working with natural language. If you just go back and try to build the things we were trying to build in 2013, now it's trivial. I don't think I'm so convinced now that people have put hundreds of billions of dollars in developing a whole range of tools which are incredibly useful. And I think the trick is going to be reorienting companies to work fast enough to take advantage of these. But yeah, it's not going to do magic stuff. It's not going to come up. People are like, oh, it's going to rediscover new physics or something like that. Maybe, but
there's
inference very cheap.
Yeah, and there's a ceiling here, right? Ultimately, it's a language. You can build language-powered solutions. But there's this notion of world models when you talk about physics. It's like how does this agent understand what's going on in an outside world or the world, some version, its world, right? So let's say you build a product that helps dispatching and scheduling and optimizing routing of people. Fantastic, you got a map and you do all of that, but then somebody gets a flat tire in the real world. The system knows nothing of that, right? So there's limitations, but we're far, far away from hitting those ceilings. Let's ask you a question.
Okay.
We had an interesting conversation. We've had many interesting conversations, but intelligence is an interesting thing that we're sort of creating synthetic intelligence, if you like.
Yeah, certainly. You mentioned this earlier. Sorry, I'll just.
Yeah, go ahead.
The conversation we're having right before we start recording is what happens when intelligence is no longer the constraint in business, and that's a little bit of a leap, right? Because what is intelligence? What does intelligence as a constraint mean? But certainly the way we're selling AI in 2025, and I say we, you're out there talking to people, they're saying, wow, well, the thing they're imagining is, wow, I can have a pretty big range of complex situations, and this system just kind of turns it from complex and difficult into simple. It has that magical effect in the same way, a friend talked about what you really want from a great consultant is that you can have a conversation and they say, I got it. And you trust them and you get it. And so many interactions with the computer went from, well, if I'm very precise about exactly what I want, it'll do it. And I can do something very simple many, many times and it'll kind of create these complex outcomes. To flipping around, I can give it anything and it'll come up with a reasonable answer. And I think that's kind of like what we're talking about with intelligence, is you can kind of take all the complexity and disorder of your business. Instead of making additional hires or bloating a team up, you can do it with a much leaner team, and that intelligence can do work for you. So, and I think that's what people mean when they're talking about intelligence.
Yeah, and then just to interject there, when I talked earlier about the wow that I got from people doing the demo, it was exactly that moment. Like they may have said something to the effect of, wow, that thing, it's kind of intelligence. It was able to infer, it was able to reason. So yeah, so I get you. So
yeah, and that's what everybody wants. If you're a manager, you just want that one employee who can kind of look ahead for you, take in various things, kind of read up, research, and then just pop out like, hey, here's the answer. I got you. You don't need to worry and have that stress. And I think that's what companies mean when they say, hey, we need intelligent people. We need people on this. This is a people business. And I think what's going to happen is intelligence is no longer, of kind of like roughly in that range, is no longer going to be the constraint. And so what will be the constraint? Because either one of two possibilities. Either businesses will cease to exist and we'll all live in a magical fantasy land where there's no constraints, or maybe the machines get mad at us and we live in a hellish, post-apocalyptic world. Because I don't really put much credence into that kind of singularity thinking, that it's either going to be great or terrible, but we're not going to have agency. I think what will happen is we'll still have organizations and companies in very much a recognizable form, but a lot of the things that used to be the limiting factor for us, which is the ability to understand customer problems or write code, just not going to be quite the same constraints. But there will still be things that companies and people come together to overcome. And I think a lot of that is going to be about building the ability to understand the world and to affect it. And I generally lump this under a term I would call effectiveness, which means that you have this intelligence now in the world. How does it figure things out? Well, it has to have access to those things. Privacy, security, secrecy are always at stake. Certainly I think anyone who's listening to this podcast can think of a situation where they were more than intelligent enough to do something, but they weren't given the budget, they weren't allowed in the room, they weren't read into the problem. And I think that's going to be a major limitation for that intelligence, even to encounter a world where it can start to do things. Is that there's still a lot of those things in place, and we're going to be very careful, because obviously we understand what's going to happen if we just have no security. That's not a world we want to live in. So it's going to be this process, and I think that will be much more on people's minds, is how do we get the intelligence, get access to things, and then of course the second one is how do we give it access to those levers to actually spend money, take action, affect other people in the world. And those are going
there's almost a bigger aperture. There's an essay by the CEO of Anthropic called Machines of Loving Grace, and he references a term called return on intelligence. So you think of return on investment. What's my ROI? I put $10 in. What am I going to get out? Return on intelligence is, if I invest in intelligence, and now we kind of can, well, we could before to hire people. Now maybe it's investing in AI as well. What is that return for me as a business? If I put $10 into AI, what am I expecting to get out? And I think we would all agree that there's a limitation of the return on intelligence, right? I loved your example, and I kind of feel it viscerally when when you interview somebody or you hire somebody, you're like, oh my God, this is great. This person I can trust them. They can do all of this stuff, but it's not all things to everybody. So like we have this perfect, cheap intelligence accessible to us as a business. What's left over, Matt? Like what else do we need to have a really successful business?
You framed this wonderfully. I was taking notes while you were talking to your last one. I was like, oh, this is a perfect segue. Where you talked about agents are this year, but what happens when you have many, many agents? It's orchestration becomes the next problem. One of the biggest things in the last 20 years is the idea of social media. Or look at a product like Uber, which is a coordination problem. It's a classic. Amazon is a classic. It's a coordination problem. They're not building new products. Uber didn't build cars. They didn't invent driving. They didn't train the drivers. It's a pure orchestration. And same thing with Amazon. I had a friend who was a leader in the 80s developing coordination software, and they very much when Amazon came out, they viewed it as a pure coordination technology, bringing many people together. But Amazon didn't build anything. They don't write books. They don't author books. They just deliver them, and they don't even deliver early on, right? And so we need to see orchestrations, networks of people, as still incredibly important. And now instead of just people, it's going to be agents, people, and so on. But when you think about effectiveness, right, you think about so much of what you consider your identity is based on whether people will listen to you. And we say this as we're making a podcast, and do what you say. Right? That is a form of being able to affect the world. And I don't know if I'm using that word quite correctly, but I want the same word. The ability to interact in a way that my state can be affected, and then I can alternatively push that out. Well, if you don't have a great reputation, if you don't have the ability to command an audience, if you don't have the ability to gain trust, then you can't affect most things. And orchestration and that ability to create these networks, they go hand in glove. It's not like you're just moving dead chess pieces around a board. You're building ideology, you're building reputation, you're building a vision of the future. All of that is actually what goes into coordination. And human beings have a very long history of doing that. Now, AI is going to continue to encroach upon us, but I think there are very deep aspects of being a human being which do not, are not, we understand what it is to be anxious about our place in society. That's going to be a very important part of what comes next. And I think a lot of AI has no sense of shame, gives wrong answers, it's very bold. But once you have this more existential problem of how do you be someone in a community, which is like the identity of orchestration. We're not talking about moving little robots around a factory floor. We're talking about organizing society going forward. Well, that's a shame. All of the whole thing of the domain of power, of all of the things that a powerful person has to keep in mind. And we haven't scratched the surface of solving those problems with AI yet. So that's going to be, I think, if you say orchestrations in 2026, people really need to start thinking about reputation, access, place in society, who's in control, power, who's in command. I'm trying to throw out a whole bunch of stuff that it doesn't sound like AI has even attempted to work on yet. And I think that's going to be a huge, everyone's going to be, we're still going to have jobs in 2 or 3 years because that is a nasty problem that doesn't really get solved by intelligence. How many people have you been involved with who are incredibly intelligent and have very little control over things? It's not an obvious problem solved by intelligence. It's something else. And it's something we're good at. It's something we have a lot of skill at, but it's not a skill we generally think about in that way.
Yeah, as a society, it's going to be really interesting as and this is not the first time humanity has sort of dealt with things like this. I imagine a time where return on physical strength was extremely high, right? Oh my goodness, look at the size of that guy. I'm going to, do whatever he says, right? That time has passed. Return on intelligence, I don't think it's going to pass very quickly here. I think it's going to be still a thing, but there's more to it than just the human manifestation of intelligence isn't just, mathematical skills or language skills. There's more stuff beyond that, but it's going to be super interesting to see how we kind of dissect that and understand the humanity of it all, I suppose.
And I think the big takeaway is just there's many more parts of being human, and AI is going to become more human, right? It's not to say human versus AI, but like the idea of being someone who has a reputation at stake, an identity at stake, who is always looking for more funding or more control or access to secret negotiations or access to the levers of power, right? Like everyone has been, certainly here in business, that's like a day-to-day worry. Not like, oh, I need to make sure this spreadsheet's correct. You need to worry about that, but I would put it like 80-20 at minimum of our thought is about the dynamics of power, and not necessarily being power hungry or Machiavellian, but just it's hard to be someone. And AI hasn't even yet started on that path yet of developing reputation and organizing communities in the way that they would have to. So I think just watch out for that. Like
Yeah.
Start thinking about AI that way, and a lot of interesting stuff will start to emerge in terms of what's coming next.
Yeah, I think we'll actually value being human in its truest sense even more. I think human service will be a premium level service. It's already headed that way, right? So it's going to be interesting. Okay, time to land the plane. I've got another quick one for you. I don't know if you have an answer. Anything that caught your attention this week
Oh,
in the
geez.
AI
Oh my
landscape?
God, you're
And
making me think about what happened in the last week.
yeah, I can go if you're not ready.
You caught me off guard, but I've been posting about the idea of replacing people with AI, and that's been getting the best in my own personal life. Has been getting the best response of anything I've posted in quite a long time, just like you say. And so it's I think people are really have a strong awareness that something interesting is happening with AI, and that it can possibly solve big problems for them, and it resonates really well. So just I don't. It's not a
Yeah.
public thing. It's just an interesting data point from my own life.
Yeah. My big observation from the week was actually from the sort of the machinations of the AI industry and the fact that OpenAI announced their roadmap for the first time. Sam Altman kind of opened the kimono and talked about where they're going. So there's some interesting kind of competitive market dynamics going on in that space. We talked about DeepSeek as well before. So it leads into a bigger question that I have no answers for, which is where do these foundational model providers live today, and where are they headed in the next 12 to 24 months in terms of the overall landscape?
Yeah, part of they pushed a lot of search features into the 4.0 model for OpenAI. And that's really interesting because that's, of course, between deep research, which they released a couple weeks ago, and adding search to their core chat experience. A very strong challenge to potentially Google's whole monopoly. So
Interesting times. All right, Matt. I guess we're done for the week. We'll be back next week.
next
See ya.
week, see ya.